I couldn't be more grateful to Jackie Zehner for inviting me here today. You know, I attend a lot of women's conferences. I've known Jackie for a long time, and I'm trying to remember exactly how we met. I think it was at a Women Moving Millions event. I think I spoke at an event, and she came up to me afterwards. And she's one of those people that the second that you meet her, you're BFFs, and I consider her one of those people. So I am humbled to be here to talk about money. Did anyone say green? Did anyone say green? This is green. And money, for me, has so many applications, so much relevance. But for me, what I want to talk about is what I call inspirations and aspirations. And this is specifically about women, money, and power. And sometimes we forget the value of money. And you heard Scott say, yes, I'm on $1.8 trillion out of $2.2 trillion in U.S. circulation. It's very exciting, global circulation. But that journey was not easy. So I was part of the Treasury Federal Reserve Transition Team at the height of the financial crisis. Before that, I was managing director of investments for a $22 billion firm based in San Francisco. So it's not like I didn't think that women's issues weren't important. I've always believed that, but it wasn't part of my consciousness. It wasn't part of my daily life. My career path was very quantitative. So for me, as long as I made my hurdles and my metrics, I got rewarded. So I never really thought about gender in the workplace in the same way. I had fabulous bosses. I had fabulous jobs along the way. And so for me, my life was great. My life was fabulous in San Francisco. But when I got that call in the fall of 2008, who doesn't remember the financial crisis? So when I got that call to be one of 24 finance professionals to come in to implement the legislation that Congress had just passed to put the economy back on track. Of course, you can't say no. I had, at that time, I think, 4 months of vacation saved, I think. So what better way to spend my vacation than to go and, go to the economic house on fire? And I'm glad I did. I never, though, in a million years thought that my career would progress the way that it has and to what I'm doing today. So it was during that time that I came across this epiphany, if you will. So you'll hear a little bit more about my career path. And yes, I am now on my fourth tour of duty, I guess, in a presidential appointment as chair of America 250, which I'll talk about as well. But again, this awakening for me, if you remember how stressful it is for the world, I mean, literally, we were spiraling. Our economy was spiraling. And I would take my breaks at the Historical Resource Center at Treasury. Now, people don't realize that Treasury didn't just produce money. They actually produced all the financial products of the federal government. Everything from, they still produce a security page of your passport. They produce military payment certificates, savings bonds, food stamps, postage stamps. And in the Historical Resource Center, they had all the archives of all the renderings and concepts. Actually very, very beautiful, and no one had access to them unless you were there. So that's where I would take my breaks. And this is one of the first things that I came across. There it is. This is a photo from 1913, and it was called a suffrage pageant. This was a pageant, if you will, at 15th and Pennsylvania Avenue, literally in front of the Treasury building, 7 years prior to the passage of the 19th Amendment granting women the right to vote. What I love about this is those 6 windows to the right was my office. So I literally walked up those steps every single day. And this is only one of 22 photos that I found of real women in Treasury, in the Historical Resource Center, which I thought was a little odd. But again, that was kind of my awakening of many, many things. And what I realized when I was going through these renderings and drawings and concepts is that every image that I came across of women were not real women. They were allegorical figures, like Lady Liberties, sometimes with togas and sometimes without togas. But every single image that I came across of a man was a real man. A founding father, a cabinet member, a president. And I thought, well, this is very strange because, if you look at our currency, and currency around the world, by the way, if you look around the world, people use currency to really document their history, right? You'll see a very important person on the back, on the front, and on the back you'll see an edifice or a monument or some event that's depicted. So for us, it dawned on me, literally, at that time, I did a little bit of homework, There were 30 countries, almost 30 countries, who had women on their modern day currency. Yet we, as a country, still to this day, have never had the portrait of a woman on our Federal Reserve notes, ever. Strange, right? So if this is what we use to institutionalize our history, why are we missing half the population? So I asked the Bureau of Engraving and Printing director, who would eventually report to me, and his deputy, the same question. Why hasn't this happened before? They all separately had the same answer, a version of the same answer. Ready? No one's ever brought it up. Not a surprise. Now, do I think it was a deliberate omission? Not really, no. I just think it was a consciousness that does not exist, and still, in my opinion, does not exist in this country when it comes to women, money, and power. So I made that my life's mission. Of the 24 finance professionals who are on the transition team, about half a dozen were recommended for a permanent appointment. I was one of them. So I moved my family. My daughter was 9, my son was 13, not exactly the best time to move your kids from California to this foreign land of DC, but I did, and no regrets whatsoever, absolutely none. But it has not been easy, and I paid a price. I'm 30 years older, it feels like, 30 years older from the time that I had my big awakening, but it has really started a fire in me that I can't stop, and it's a good thing. It's a very, very good thing. So one of the things that I had to do in thinking about how to get a portrait of a woman on our currency was do my homework. And I realized the law in the US, believe it or not, to redesign paper currency, it's one person in the US. It's not the president, and it's not Congress. It's the Secretary of the Treasury, by law. Tim Geithner was my boss, amazing person. I cobbled together my justification and what I was going to do, but I also wanted to test the waters with him first, just to make sure that, look, this wasn't a woman for the sake of a woman. It literally dawned on me as I was thinking about how currency is redesigned. It's a very technical process of covert and overt features to deter counterfeiting. And the denominations aren't just selected out of a hat. They're chosen by security threat. But again, I wanted to make this about democracy. And it dawned on me that the timing of the currency redesign was such that we would unveil our first notes in 2020, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. 2020, what's in 2020 for women? The 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment granting women the right to vote. And using this theme of democracy, which, by the way, is still the theme to this day for this next generation of currency, who would have thought it'd be so relevant today, using that theme of democracy, what better way to represent giving a voice to the voiceless, giving the ability for 51% of the population to participate in the governance process than by recognizing the right to vote. That's how this became about a woman. So I said to Secretary Geithner, this was in January of 2010. I wanted to test the waters, like I said, and I said to him, I said, look, Tim, I said, do you realize I am still the only woman confirmed here in Treasury? 1 year into our administration, and I was it. And he said, look, I'm working on it, and he was. And I said, look, but this coming March is the 30th anniversary of Women's History Month. This was March 2010. I said, do you realize that 4 of the 6 economic decision makers are women in the administration? He says, what do you mean? I said, well, there's you and Larry Summers at the time at the National Economic Council, but there was Christina Romer at the Council of Economic Advisors, Sheila Bair at the FDIC, Mary Shapiro at the SEC, and Elizabeth Warren at the time, the head of the Congressional Oversight Panel. I said, that's it. That's it. It's you, Larry, and these 4 women. I said, if I had my druthers for this Women in Finance Symposium that I want to have in March, they would be panel 1. Panel 2 would be the female pioneers of Wall Street. And it's not talking about having it all. It's not talking about work-life balance. It's talking about the role that women are playing in the economic recovery, period. So my favorite words that he said immediately was, how can I help? Thank you. I ran out of the room. When you get that, you run out of the room, right? Thank you. I'll get back to you. So we had it, and it was amazing, and all of those women accepted my invitation. You will never, ever see those women talking at conferences about women. Why? Because again, this isn't about work-life balance or having it all. This is about their role in making history. And it was so powerful, amazing, that it actually became the cover of Time magazine. May of 2010, if you remember this, that whole article was about this Women in Finance Symposium, and I knew I was onto something. And so you recall, of course, it took a while. In October of 2012 is actually when Secretary Geithner approved my project to put the portrait of a woman on our Federal Reserve notes. We finally made the announcement in April of 2016. I'm skipping over a lot of years for a lot of reasons. And then when I left, I knew it wasn't over. I knew this was just the beginning, because something really dawned on me when 2020 actually came around. There is no other historical milestone for women in this country than the suffrage centennial. I'd like to say it's Roe v. Wade, but not everyone would accept that, right? So the suffrage centennial, in my opinion, in 2020 kind of came and went with very little fanfare. Very upsetting for me because, again, when I had my epiphany in December of 2008, working up to 2020, almost 12 years later, and not much happened. I will tell you some things did happen, and they happened because, again, I'm not stopping anytime soon. So when I left, you heard Scott mention one of my first projects called Teachers Writing History. I've done a number of other projects, Notable Women with Google, etc. But statues was the other thing that really dawned on me that, again, the physical recognition of women is pretty scarce. In fact, in Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, if you walk around Washington, D.C. and try to find statues of real American women outdoors in the public domain, how many do you think you're going to find in our nation's capital, where people come from all over the world to see what we value and whom we value? How many do you think we're going to find? 2. You're going to find Eleanor Roosevelt at her husband's memorial, and Mary McLeod Bethune, a teacher in Lincoln Park. That's it. That's it. And so if you look around our country, in San Francisco, where I'm born and raised, how many do you think we have women in the public domain, outdoors, real American women? 0. 0. New York, Central Park. You heard of this story? Central Park. There are 22 statues of real people. Women, ready for this? Mother Goose, Alice in Wonderland, and Juliet. Until New York Life, who I met with, made the first investment in a collection of statues of real women in Central Park. There was another group that was starting the campaign, and it actually happened. So this is now in Central Park, which was unveiled, by the way, on August 26th. Thank you. August 26, 2020. This is my daughter, and this is my daughter with Hillary Clinton. I got to tell you, this was a magical moment. It was still during the pandemic, so it wasn't a widely attended event. But we were the only ones that were seated next to the secretary, so it was actually an honor. But when you go now in Central Park, you will now see these collections of statues. That's Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and Sojourner Truth. But it took a long time to get there. And by the way, I'm still working on that statue in San Francisco. It has been approved. It's actually going to be Maya Angelou in front of the library. Very exciting. But the sad part is that idea was pitched in 2018, and here we are in 2024. So again, a little frustrating for me. But look, 2020, I wasn't done. I wasn't done. With the help of Senator Chris Coons, who reached out to me. I didn't know him, but apparently his daughter Maggie wanted to meet me, and so we had coffee. This was in 2018. And so we had coffee, and he said, look, I've been following what you're doing. This is really great. How can I help? My favorite words. Of course, I'm going to give him an assignment. I said, Senator Coons, I said, women have not been recognized on congressional gold medals in a way that they deserved. In fact, in my administration, the whole 8 years of my administration, there was only one legislative act honoring American women, and it was the 4 girls who died in the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing of 1963. That was the only congressional medal act for women. I said, we need more. We need more. And so thankfully to him, in 2020, he passed legislation to have the women of Hidden Figures honored on a congressional gold medal. So yes, beautiful. I mean, So one more big project that I worked on for 2020, again, came and went, little fanfare, and there I was. I'm a one-person shop, by the way. It's just me. This is what I do in my spare time, because again, it ignited me. It literally ignited me, and it's not about me. It is absolutely about my daughter. It is about my mom. That's it. That's all that matters to me, is what it did for my mom to recognize what she did to raise me and my 8 siblings as a single parent, sending all 9 of us off to college. And it is about my daughter who, my God, when I grow up, I want to be her. That's who it's about. So I wasn't done. So yes, we still don't have a woman on our paper money. But ready for this? In order to change the currency design on paper money, as I mentioned, it's one person, Secretary of the Treasury. In order to change the design of a coin, ready for this? It's literally an act of Congress. So in 2016, I proposed legislation to put women on our quarters. Seems easy enough, seems innocuous enough, right? In fact, my proposal was to continue with the 50-state program where every state would get to nominate a woman to be placed on their quarter. We already had 2 50-state programs that already finished, 10-year programs. Painful. Very, very painful. Not a lot of support, if you can believe it. Ready for this? It took me 5 years to pass that legislation. Who has seen our women on quarters? Anyone? Very few. Okay, look, I'm literally counting 10 hands. That's so sad. That'll tell you how the media does not want to cover this. But it passed. The Circulating Coin Redesign Act of 2020, currently underway as we speak, will feature 20 women. 5 women a year for 4 years from 2022 to 2025. Then it changes to quarters redesigned for our semi-quincentennial, the 250th in 2026. And then 4 years of youth sports. That was intentional. Because what do kids collect these days? What do our kids collect these days? When I grew up, we collected coins, trading cards, stamps. I collected gum wrappers and made chains out of them. But our kids today, what do they collect? They collect likes, followers, video games. When you touch something, when you hold something, your brain synapses work in a completely different way. You get into what I call the third dimension. You start to feel. So everything I talk about, everything I do, everything I can continue to do has a physical component. That tactile connection that we, who would have known, would have actually lost through the pandemic, is so important today, now more than ever. So I want kids, and both my kids are strong athletes, I want kids starting in 2027 to look for their sport, look for their quarters, look for themselves. So important. And so when we finally made this announcement, and the first coin that was unveiled was Maya Angelou. So exciting. Of course, this is my daughter. And Speaker Pelosi. Speaker Pelosi was kind enough to host an unveiling in San Francisco because Maya Angelou has roots in San Francisco. She worked at the library there. And Congresswoman Barbara Lee helped me pass the legislation. It was amazing at this particular event, which is in March of 2022. Obviously, Speaker Pelosi was the speaker at the time. We sent out this press release. The 3 of us were hosting this. Maya Angelou's family was there. Not one media outlet showed up. This is the first time in the history of our country we've had an African-American woman on our coin and currency. When you Google this event, you will only see Speaker Pelosi's press release. Not the biggest fan of the media at the moment. And it's because, look, I mean, again, as I mentioned, 2020 came and went. Mexico beat us as having the first female president in their history, which is, yay, it's good for them, but what does it say about us? What does that say about us? So as I talk about the past, this is why those inspirations are so important, because we want those aspirations for future history makers, right? These are your daughters, these are our grandkids, these are our nieces. When you're talking about 51% of the population, that means everyone has a stake in the outcome. When you talk to any proud father, and I hate to say this, but most of my champions have been men with daughters. When you talk to any proud father, they will be the first ones to tell you that their daughters can do anything, right? They'll be the first ones to say that. But can they, right? If you don't see your value, if you aren't physically recognized in areas where money, power, and influence actually matter, it makes a difference, right? It really holds you back in ways as part of your consciousness that you wouldn't anticipate otherwise. We all have to feel that value. So as I think about kind of the future, what does the future hold? So I spent 2 years studying millennials and post-millennials. I'm going to go through this very, very quickly. So and this is the research that I did at the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study at Harvard. So anyone that was basically born in the mid-90s and later, basically grew up with the internet, right? So because they grew up with the internet, they see the world as flat. It's no longer what they're taught at home, what they're taught in the classroom. It's what they see. It's what they have access to, the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? But you got to remember, they love flexibility, they love optionality. It's not about one thing going away, it's just increasing the pie. That's the way they think. So by the way, this is going to be very important as you think about your consumers, your voters, your, the kind of the future of our kind of social and economic fabric. These are the ones. This is the group that's going to make the difference because, again, they are unfettered in ways that have been unprecedented because of that access to the internet. They don't like the same borders, boxes, and boundaries that we were raised with. They want complete everything optionality. They're confident, progressive, educated, savvy with technology, civic-minded, globally conscious, and entrepreneurial. My son, after 4 years at Goldman Sachs, made the decision to go start his own company. I'm telling him, no, Joey, no, they love you there. No one's raising money, but you can't stop that spirit. He's doing very well, by the way. Very exciting. But everyone thinks they're going to be a CEO by 30. And how do we facilitate? How do we engender that? How do we make them feel like anything is possible? You can't stop them, but we can guide them. That is our role. We got to guide them. So in general, they're not kind of one orientation versus the other. They're not one religion versus the other. Same thing with race, same thing with gender, same thing with political affiliation. They'll be the last ones to tell you I'm this or that. They don't want to be boxed. And so again, that type of fluidity and flexibility, we should absolutely help them, again, guide them along their way. So understand and do your own homework. This is, again, I'm giving you the very Cliff Notes version here. But my whole goal now is to invest in that next generation. My whole goal now is to make sure that they vote, because they don't. Make sure that they understand the issues, because sometimes they don't. They get misinformation. So that is our role, to help them, to empower them, more than anything to empower them. And so I want to kind of end with this. We missed our mark in 2020, no doubt in my mind. Came and went. And it wasn't for lack of trying. Obviously, you saw what I tried to do in 2020 with very little attention, because it's not tabloid enough, it's not entertaining enough, it's not sexy enough. And it's also very threatening to give women the power that we deserve. But we do have a line in the sand now, and it is 2026. So I am now chair of America 250. I was appointed by President Biden 2 years ago to lead the efforts to plan the nation's 250th anniversary 2 years away. So a lot happening. And my goal is to absolutely make sure that over 50% of the population as women will be represented in our history in order to inspire the future. So it's not over, ladies and men. It is not over. Own this moment and think about what you want to accomplish by 2026. The movement is starting. We're going to make some huge announcements on July 4th about our efforts. And here's what's so important. We as a country are going to have a global stage in front of us, because what else is happening in 2026 in the US? The World Cup. Mostly in the US, the World Cup. And then what else is happening 2 years later on a global stage in the US? The Olympics in LA, 2028. So I literally just came back from the Milken Global Conference, where I shared the stage with Gianni Infantino, the head of FIFA, and gold medalists Lindsey Vonn and Janet Evans, talking about the intersection of all these historical milestones happening for the very first time, converging for the very first time, where we have this global platform of democracy that has never existed before. And if we as women do not own that moment, we're going to have to wait another 94 years to the next centennial. So grab this moment, run with it, and make it happen. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.